One of the most interesting things that I learned in my research and my learning about this medium is a convention called the gutter, and that truly is the technical term for it. It's the white space in between the panels. When I first started working with students and we realized the power of this convention, we started calling it the ditch. We didn't really have the word for it that we needed, but later in my research I figured out that it was called the gutter. The gutter is such an important part of Graphica because it's essentially analogous to reading between the lines in traditional text. If we were to look at a panel and assume that that were analogous to paragraphing in traditional text, then the gutter would be reading between the lines in traditional text, so that whenever we move from one panel to another, we can talk to students about the types of inferring that happens in that gutter. This initially occurred in an independent reading block I was spending with some students, and they were sharing a Spiderman story. And they called me over to help them figure out a confusion that they were having, and as it seems, Spiderman had somersaulted into a large bush, and in the next panel we see a person walking down the street with a backpack, and Spiderman's nowhere to be found. And the students were wondering, where exactly did Spiderman go? What happened to Spiderman? Our conversation really directed us to looking at that white space and saying, what did happen to Spiderman in this white space? Just like in traditional text, authors leave a lot for us to infer. In the same way in traditional text that they do that, they also do that in Graphica, and the white space is where we do that inferring. And the students were able to work together to realize that what happened was Spiderman had changed clothes in the bushes and came out from the bushes as Peter Parker and walked down the street back to his house. It was a powerful moment for me as an instructor, because while I've taught inferring before, I've never really had a visual representation of what that means to infer from one part of the story to the other. And it was really something that I capitalized on quite a bit in that school year, and then, in successive school years as well. So after my initial learning about the gutter and realizing the power that it had for inferring, I started to look at other ways that the gutter can be used, and I noticed that the gutter can serve as a natural checkpoint for all kinds of comprehension strategies that we talk about in traditional text. For instance, in traditional text, we'll tell students, when you get to the end of the page or when you get to the end of a paragraph, go ahead and stop and shore up your thinking before you move forward. We do the same thing in Graphica. When you get to a gutter, allow that to be kind of a stopping point where you start to think and shore up your thinking and your confusions, ask questions, wonderings that you're having, make connections from one panel to the other. Allow yourself some time to make some inferences and do some predicting what's about to happen. So the gutters really do serve as kind of a natural checkpoint for shoring up meaning and applying comprehension strategies that they've been taught throughout the school year. One of the reasons a lot of teachers shy away from Graphica is because they simply aren't aware of the number of titles out there that really are appropriate for the elementary student, and not only just appropriate, but interesting, and can also support their instruction both in literacy, social studies, science, and even mathematics. So there are a lot of resources out there for teachers if they'll take the time to look for them. One of the things that I did in the book was create an anthology of resources to kind of help make that hunt a little bit easier, so that you can find those resources a lot quicker. I've also included a selection guide to help you make appropriate decisions about text, so that you can sit down with the selection guide and the text you're considering and decide if this is an appropriate text for your students and the students that you've chosen to work with.